picture the scene. It's the summer of 2026, the World Cup final, and for the first time in history, the United States are world champions. 80,000 fans erupt. A nation that barely noticed soccer is suddenly obsessed. And in that single moment, everything changes. But what would a USA World Cup win actually mean? Not just for soccer, for the entire country, because history tells us something remarkable. When a nation wins on the world's biggest stage, it can change that nation forever. For better, and sometimes for worse. This is what could really happen if the USA wins the World Cup. Let's start with the obvious. The United States has never won the Men's World Cup. Never. For a country used to being the best at everything, that's almost hard to believe. America dominates the Olympics. America invented or perfected half the world's biggest sports. But soccer? Soccer always belonged to everyone else. So a World Cup win wouldn't just be a trophy. It would be the toppling of the one barrier America never broke. And winning it at a home World Cup, in front of their own people, that's the kind of story that gets remembered for 100 years. But here's what makes this bigger than sport. Because winning the World Cup does something strange to a country. It brings people together in a way almost nothing else can. Look at France in 1998, a divided nation, anxious about identity and immigration. Then a multicultural French team won the World Cup on home soil. And for a few unforgettable weeks, the whole country celebrated as one, different backgrounds, different beliefs, all wearing the same shirt. Look at Argentina in 2022, a country crushed by economic crisis. Millions of people had every reason to feel hopeless. Then Messi lifted the trophy, and an estimated 4 million people flooded the streets of Buenos Aires. It didn't fix their economy. It didn't solve their problems. But for one moment, an entire nation felt joy at the same time. That's the power of the World Cup. But the greatest example of all didn't even happen in soccer. It happened in rugby. In South Africa, in 1995. The country was barely out of apartheid, wounded, divided. Black and white South Africans had spent decades torn apart. Then South Africa hosted the Rugby World Cup, and rugby at the time was seen as a white man's sport. But Nelson Mandela saw an opportunity. When the Springboks reached the final, Mandela walked onto the field, wearing the green Springbok jersey, the very symbol his people had once resented. And he wore the number of the team's white captain, Francois Pienaar. South Africa won. And in that moment, a divided nation saw itself as one team, one country. It didn't erase the pain of the past, but it showed people what unity could feel like, and the story didn't end there. In 2019, South Africa won the Rugby World Cup again, this time led by Siya Kolisi, a man who grew up in poverty in a township, their first ever black captain, a team of every race, lifting the trophy together. Many South Africans called it even bigger than 1995. Because this time, the unity wasn't a gesture, it was real. That is what sport can do. It can hold up a mirror to a country and show it the best version of itself. So imagine that power. In the United States, in 2026, a country that right now feels more divided than ever. Different politics, different beliefs, constant arguments about who Americans even are. And then, on a single night, a soccer team unites them. Red states and blue states cheering for the same goal. Strangers hugging in bars they'd never normally enter. For one night, just Americans. But the unity is only the beginning, because a World Cup win could transform the sport itself. Soccer in America has always lived in the shadows, behind football, behind basketball, behind baseball. A World Cup win would drag it into the spotlight overnight. Kids who never cared about soccer would suddenly want to play. Participation would explode. Investment would pour in. The next generation of American talent would be inspired by that single moment. The way a whole generation picks up a sport after seeing their heroes win. And the economic impact could be enormous. Merchandise, tourism, television deals, sponsorships. A World Cup win turns a national team into a global brand. Then there's something less obvious. Soft power, the way the world sees a country. America winning the World Cup would announce something to the planet, that the USA isn't just a soccer tourist anymore. It's a soccer nation, respected on the one stage it never conquered. So far, this all sounds perfect. A united country, a booming sport, a proud nation. But there's another side to this story, a darker one. Because winning doesn't always bring out the best in people. Sometimes it brings out the worst. And we just saw it happen. In June of 2026, the New York Knicks won the NBA championship. Their first in 53 years. A whole city that had waited generations finally got its moment. And the celebration turned to chaos. More than 60 people were arrested in a single night. There were stabbings, windshields smashed, fans climbing statues, light poles, and scaffolding. Buses were set on fire in the streets. And that was one city. For a basketball title. Now imagine the entire country celebrating a World Cup. Not one city. Every city. All at once. And this isn't new. When the Chicago Bulls won their championships in the 90s, the celebrations exploded into riots. Hundreds of arrests, looting, Gunfire in the streets. When Vancouver lost the Stanley Cup final in 2011, the riot caused hundreds of injuries and millions in damage. Sometimes it's joy that turns violent. Sometimes it's heartbreak. But the pattern is always the same. When emotion overwhelms a city, control can disappear. And a World Cup win would be the most emotional sporting moment in American history. The celebrations could be beautiful, or they could be dangerous, possibly both. So a World Cup win wouldn't just test America's joy, it would test America's restraint. And that's the strange truth about winning. It reveals who you really are. South Africa won and showed the world unity. Some cities have won and shown the world chaos. The trophy is the same. The reaction is a choice. So if the USA wins the World Cup, what would it really mean? It could be the moment a divided country remembers how to celebrate together. It could launch soccer into a golden era. It could inspire a generation of kids who never touched a ball. It could change how the entire world sees America. But it could also spill into the streets in ways nobody wants to see. The truth is, it would mean all of it at once. Because that's what the World Cup does. It doesn't just crown a champion, it holds up a mirror. And if that day ever comes, America won't just find out if it can win. It'll find out what kind of nation it becomes when it does. So here's the real question. If the USA lifts that trophy in 2026, will it bring out the best in the country? Or the worst? Because the whole world will be watching to find out.